It does take work, and it's just not going to happen if you just say, well, if it just, people, this is one thing I will tell people. Time does not heal all wounds. Time is just time. The wounds are healed by when you actually invest the time in order to heal yourself. If you have the combination of a good therapist along with a good coach, in my opinion, that's the component where you really start coming out the other side. That's just my recommendation.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together.
I have to admit, I'm getting a little sentimental watching that because I don't know if you guys saw my live today. I said that I'm stopping this show after about 10 more episodes. So the people that are scheduled, I'm going to finish that up, and then I'm going to take a break. I don't know how long the break will be, but creating time to hike and camp and be and spend more time with my kids. And, I am retired, right? So I guess that's something that I'm allowed to do. Hi, James. Welcome. So, just watching that intro and just thinking about all the work that goes into doing a live stream. I was talking with Tim Sohn a little bit today. We were exchanging messages back and forth on LinkedIn. And it is time consuming. It's challenging. It's fun. I love doing the interviews. I learn from every guest. And sometimes, especially like after 3.5 years or so of doing this, it's time to move on to something else. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm excited to have Brad Burchnell here tonight. And he is the Chief Heartset Officer coach for his company, From My Heart to Yours. And he's the author of a book called From My Heart to Yours, I Am Not My Mistakes. He's a former Chief Petty Officer, so he's a fellow Navy veteran, and he's a dad, a grandfather. He calls himself a grandpa, and he's a survivor of suicide loss. So please join us. We're going to talk about the importance of our mental health and well-being in creating lives that we love living. And we're also going to talk about how leaders, at work, how can leaders engage with their team on mental health and well-being types of issues? Because sometimes that's something that if you don't experience it yourself, or you don't know that much about it, or you might think, well, it doesn't belong as a discussion in the workplace, all these things. So I'm looking forward to bringing Brad on. And yes, James, you're right. I need you. You said you need you time, and that's exactly right. And I'm creating that time for myself. So let me bring Brad in. Welcome, Brad.
Well, thank you very much, man. What a great intro. That's awesome. And man, how blessed do I feel to be in some of the final 10 countdown. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, you don't get that opportunity too many times. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to have you here. And I've watched a lot of your interviews in the past. I'm going to pretend like I don't know much when I'm asking you questions, because some of the guests, people watching, may not know that much. And then also just your posts on LinkedIn lately. You've been posting quite a bit. You've been doing a lot of reflecting, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And so why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story?
Well, I guess to start out where it's at, it's funny how things go in your journey. Mine was started with my daughter when she was born in California, and she struggled, for quite a long while trying to find her place in life. And she went to San Diego State and was a major in psychology, of all things. And then she moved on to her master's program to become a full-time clinician. And she was about two classes away from completing her master's program, and she dropped out.
Mm.
Kind of leading up to that, she was getting into what they call practicum, and within practicum, that's equivalent of residency for for obviously for mental health clinicians. So she had three choices. One was working at risk girls. Another one was working alongside one of her professors who was a clinician and who was in marriage and family therapy, which was eventually the area where she wanted to go to and
Mm-hmm.
practice. And the last one was working in pediatric hospice. It's a tough environment. I mean, I experienced the loss of my father as a result of cancer, and his was pancreatic. But
Mm.
I also had friends of mine that that work in hospice, and and they work with adults. And one of the things I brought up to them, told them about the opportunity for my daughter, and they said, Brad, that's a tough environment.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me about your daughter. And I go, she's highly empathetic and really has that level of bonding. And she's one of those that didn't want to step on a bug, let alone anything else. And I was really deeply concerned for her mental well-being, and I wanted to make sure that she understood the depth. And she asked me, she goes, what do you think, Dad? And I'm like, honey, I says, well, the first two sound phenomenal. I said, I think you'd be good in it, any of them. Not that I don't think that you could do a great job of the pediatric hospice component of it. I'm just extremely concerned because I have friends of mine that are in that. And I said, I would prefer you to make a different choice, but that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
What she heard was, I didn't think she could do it.
Oh,
So she ended up picking that up. It was right around,
how do you know that's what she heard?
because later on I asked her,
Mm-hmm.
and in my head I was like, I wonder if she thinks that. And it was many years later that I did ask her that question.
Okay.
So 2007, she ends up dropping out, and she begins her, what I call the running away from herself. She asked if she can come home, and I said, well, let me figure some things out. And
Had she started the pediatric work?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
then
she
she
was,
dropped out.
yeah, she was in, she only had two practicums left.
Okay.
And but she drops out, and she wanted to come back to Michigan. And I said, well, let me figure some things out. I talked to her the next day. I said, we figure some things out. You need to go ahead. I said, I've got a friend of mine that was a therapist, had that taken care of. Get her a car, find her a job. I said, but you're going to have to end up going to therapy. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really my first inclination that she was running, because she ended up going to living with her oldest half sister up in Wasilla, Alaska. Now my daughter was absolute beach girl, Southern California all the way, blonde hair, blue eyes, loved the beach, lived for the ocean, and for her to make that,
Go to Alaska.
yeah, it was just something was wrong. And those type of things ended up happening more frequently. Her behavior became erratic, and she was tried to wanted to come back home again later on after many years. And I just said, I'll help you any way I can, but you need to stay put where you're at. I said, I'll help you with therapy, I'll pay for that, whatever that looks like. I said, but you need to plant your feet firmly where you're at and face your demons.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't like that answer, and it was about 2 days later, I got a phone call from her mom, telling me that she had been in an accident. She was up in Big Bear and crashed her car, and went to Loma Linda, which is one of the best trauma hospitals in Southern California. And she was not doing very well. She was on an intubator, pretty pretty bunged up. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even recognize her.
Oh,
Um,
wow. I'm sorry,
and
Brad.
I appreciate that. And it wasn't until many days later that she was able to had the intubation removed, that she was finally told me that she had attempted suicide. I have pictures of the vehicle. It was a Mini Cooper. She had aimed it into the side of a mountain. I have, to this day, I have absolutely no idea how she escaped, because if you take a look at the distance between the wheel and the driver's driver's side seating, it's that close. So
Wow.
I have absolutely no clue on how she survived, but she did. It took it off. She had an open wound that never healed. 2017, she had another attempt, and it was during that year she ended up coming out to Michigan for her sister's wedding, but she just wasn't in any physical shape really to attend. So I had to make other arrangements for her for the evening in order to be taken care of. And
Was she
then
getting help then, or no? Did she go?
she was one of those that she cycled.
Mm-hmm.
She would go for a couple of 2 or 3 sessions, and then she'd go, "It's just not working," or that she would have, "It just didn't work out," type of mentality. She didn't wanna
Mm-hmm.
do the work. It then, when she did take her life on May 28th of 2018, when she jumped off a 9-story building,
Oh, wow.
and it was at her mom's apartment building, and I didn't see the call until about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I gave a call back, and her mom informed me what ended up happening. So it's one of those that, that's when you start really looking inward. You try to prepare yourself for those types of things, and you're really not. It was interesting when I finally did was talking to a therapist. We did do a forensic analysis of sorts on some of her symptomology and what she ended up having, and just some of the things that she ended up dealing with. And my therapist ended up just identifying that the high likelihood was she was borderline personality disorder. And
Mm-hmm.
it really did fit. If you take a look at, the DSM-4, and it talks about the different types of mental issues that surround that. And she fit a lot of the criteria that was dealing with that. So I think from that standpoint, at least I was able to put a name to it and
Yeah.
really better understand on what that was. The challenge really becomes after that point is obviously my marriage didn't survive for a number of different reasons, but it wasn't until November 30th of 2020 when my boss called me in the office and said, "Brad, you got to go off for 2 months. You got to go out, and you're we just see some things, and you need to go ahead and take time for you." So I availed myself to FMLA, and I talked to my therapist. And I'm thinking when I going for that, he's severe depression, whatever that is. When you get the diagnosis back, it's something that I wasn't even ready for. It was diagnosed for PTSD. And I'm
Mm.
like, wait a minute, I was never in combat.
Yeah.
But because of what ended up happening over a longer period of time and the dramatic instance of those types of things that ended up occurring, it fell under that category. So it was one of those that you look at, okay, now what? When I woke up the next morning after putting in my paperwork, it was one of those situations where you just go, now what? The night that I was home by myself, it wasn't great. I was definitely not in a very good mental space. And this is not something that I say lightly, but I did seriously consider taking my life that night. It was just one of those things, you're just so overwhelmed with everything
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, I needed to do something. And I made a decision that, the only way that I was going to be able to get through is to take some really drastic steps. And one of those, I got on the internet right away, and I made reservations to go out to see my mom and my brother out in California. And I spent 3 weeks out in California visiting my family, visiting friends, and trying to get back in a right headspace. I was really fortunate that I was in therapy at that point, had a great therapist. He was absolutely wonderful. And I was also part of another international men's group, national men's group called Uncivilized Nations with Trevor Bohm. And we just happened to have an instance where we had a practice that one of those days when I was out there by a lady by the name of Leila Dila. And she ends up worked us through a breathing practice that was able to free your mind in order to get back to where your root trauma was at. Now, I will flat out tell you, you know, my my whole mental picture in my head was, if most people know me, I was a warrior. Basically, as 15 years in the military, and I was like going, yes, that soft type of stuff, yeah,
Right.
go away from that. I don't need it.
Let me ask you a question though. But like,
Sure.
so how old was your daughter?
She was, I had to think about this. She was 37 years old. Had just, her
37.
birthday was on April 22nd. of that year. And
Right
she
after
had
she
just,
turned
yeah,
37.
right after she turned 37.
And then when your boss asked you, said you got to take time off, I mean, were you aware before he said that something was not right?
Oh, I thought I was hiding it well. I was like, well, yeah, I'm doing fine. There was days when I was, you know, it wasn't. I had my good days, I had my bad days, but I think that there was a lot of things that I was just fooling myself, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, but so you didn't fight him saying that. You're like, okay, I'll do it.
I
You
didn't
didn't.
have. Let's put it this way: I didn't have any choice.
Okay. Okay.
They said you're going out,
Well, so when
so
you look back at that, we were going to talk about like what employers could do. Do you think that was the right way to handle it?
You know, it was the way that they handled it. To be perfectly honest, each state really has to take a look at the laws. And
Mm-hmm.
and here in Michigan, legally, could they have done that? Not really. The
Mm-hmm.
laws state within mental health issues that they're not allowed to go ahead and do that. Now, for me, was it the right thing? Absolutely. But
Well, he
each
didn't
state,
fire you either. He just said you got to take some leave,
well,
right?
I was on, well, I was on paid suspension. Let's just put it
Okay.
that
All
way.
right.
But that's okay. I mean, I cover myself under FMLA, but that was what they encouraged me to do. So I
Okay.
took that as a gift. And when
Mm-hmm.
I went out, it was just something that I needed to do. And I was still going through seeing my therapist, and I was doing that online. And then, you know, I get through this point and this epiphany of where my childhood traumas all started coming into play, and all these things, and you're coming awash, your first childhood trauma, attachment issues, the PTSD component, self-trust, self-worth, all those types of things start coming into play.
It's overwhelming.
It is. And then all of a sudden I meet these two amazing people, Michael Paterano and
Mm-hmm.
Annie Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And, they said, hey, Brad, we're seeing you individually, and we really have this thing where we meet together and to be able to go ahead and have more benefit. I said, yeah, well, I could end up. They kept talking to me about this breath framework thing. And I said, well,
Right.
I'll go ahead and get into that, and I can teach them a couple of things. Well, I tell you something, it was totally transformational for me because it enabled me to really look at the very heart of my issues and where they resided. It came from my dad was had major trauma that he carried with him. He was in the
Mm-hmm.
military. He was in the teams in Korea, and he almost didn't make it. He went into in country, and there was 109. 3 came out, and he
Oh,
was
wow.
at Treasure Island. So, you know, recuperating from wounds sustained in battle, and he also lost his sister and his father in a fire in 1943. Made wards of the court. Went to an orphanage and was there until he graduated from high school.
Did you know this?
Oh
Or
yeah,
you knew it, but you didn't
oh yeah.
really like know it from a trauma perspective, maybe,
No,
and like
no,
how
because
that passes on. Yeah.
no, not a clue. Because
Mm-hmm.
those are things that I experienced with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Dad's anger, kind of his volatility, those type of things, and just some things that I experienced with my mom. Was all these things are in the book, by the way. So
Mm-hmm.
those people want to go ahead and go more in depth, they're certainly able to. And by the way, all these things that I talk about, I've already talked with my mom and
Yeah.
and the people that are involved for the most part. But I think those challenges that you see within yourself is how you start coming through those. And as I was working through those things with Annie and Michael, I really started coming out the other side. I I took there was a particular point that I made a decision when I was in Allow, and it was just probably one of the weirdest places, because there was weeks that I would just show up and say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to read you what I have.
In their
I don't
coaching program.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I had no desire to go ahead and read anything. And they were very cheerful, and they were very cathartic going through these things. So as you start looking inward about who you are and what you have drug with you,
Mm-hmm.
I made some decisions on myself. I already knew what my core values were. I knew where I started at. I knew what power I had to go ahead and claim back, what was important, what was not important. And I also shed some things. At that, I took a total break from dating. I made it a conscious decision to live a clean and sober life. I never had any problem with drugs or alcohol. It just was never something that I really had any issues with. But it's just something I said, this is just something I need in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I really needed to be focused. I had met my my girlfriend that I have now way back then. And I just didn't feel ready. I didn't feel worthy of her at that particular time. And
Mm-hmm.
I just told her, I said, I'm just not ready. And it's, when I finally called her up last year, she goes, I haven't talked to you in months, and here you are.
Awesome.
But I think that those things end up helping you understand how you get to the other side. As I started
Mm-hmm.
going through and I got to that healing side, I really started taking stock of how can I move forward with what I know now. And it took a full 2 years in order to get to the point of, people can call it, oh, I got to my happy place. I just call it my peace place.
Yeah. Yeah.
There, there are people that have known me for many years, and they say, you are not the same. I don't argue. I don't want to have to be right all the time. Perfectionism is horrible. And I took a lot of time to study. Brene Brown has been my, such a
Mm-hmm.
huge influence. Dr. Edith Eva Eger, phenomenal. Kristen Neff with, self-compassion. Robin Sharma, and, talking about both heart set and mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, people ask, how did you end up coming with such a fluffy kind of frou-frou kind of name on your company, From My Heart to Yours? And I dare you to talk to anybody that says, they haven't had a change of heart. They haven't, they can go ahead and talk about mindset all day long. But if you don't have that, 18-inch or 12-inch decision between your heart and your mind, you're a half a human. Because
Yeah.
when you have that interconnectedness, that's really where it becomes powerful.
And it takes doing that inner work that it took you 2 years, right? And you're still
Yeah.
probably not there. You're never there. You're always
No.
improving. You're always like increasing your awareness, like, oh, that's what that means. Or that's, telling me something. And so, I think you and I both have seen where there's some people, and we weren't ready at some point. You,
Yeah.
you have to be ready to do that work, right? You can't just say, yeah, I'll sign up for a program and coach
Yep.
fix me. It's not the coach fixing you, it's you.
No.
And it's
No.
not fixing, but you know what I mean? It's you doing the work on yourself.
Yeah, it's part of a lot of it. The way I look at it as a coach, I mean, I coached my youngest daughter in basketball, and and I've coached other sports programs. But for me, when you look at somebody and you say, okay, show me something, I'm like going, that's up to you. It's
Right.
just, are you ready to show up for the game? Are you willing to put in the effort? If you're not, then I'm not the right person for you, because I'll just tell people no.
Right.
Probably to the detriment of my business, but I would much prefer those individuals to come away from the interaction with me being able to think, what did I do wrong, or what do I need to do next? That's my preference. What do I need to do next for me?
How
Um,
does somebody know when they want to work on something? Like for you, your boss told you you've got
well,
some.
some of it was that I knew that but also I knew that things were not right.
Mhm.
And I also recognized that I needed some work. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes people need to have that wake up call. You take a look in the mirror and you're what are you? I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating right. I couldn't gain weight, by the way. Here I was working with a fitness and a nutrition coach, and I just couldn't eat enough. I mean,
Mhm.
I couldn't do it. I mean, I was at 150 pounds. I'm not that anymore.
Mhm.
But it wasn't healthy. I wasn't leading a healthy lifestyle, and there was something physically and mentally missing. People can go ahead and lie to themselves all day long, but you can't lie to your family. And over time, what's going to end up happening is that your body's going to start showing you that things are not right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree. Like for me, I had this intuition in the back of my mind about things, but I just kept pushing forward. I got a promotion, moved to Washington D.C., and
Mhm,
I was traveling a lot. My job was keeping me really busy. Now, probably some of those
mhm.
trips I could have said no, I'm not going or whatever, but
Yeah.
I was traveling a lot and I knew I wasn't feeling my feelings. I've interviewed somebody before too, said I didn't really like some of the ways that I was coming across at work. I'm like, that's not me. And so I thought,
Mhm.
well, when I retire, things are going to get better. It's my job. It's my
Hmm.
boss, right? It's the
It's
circumstances.
somebody
And
else.
yeah, somebody else. And once that changes, then things are going to be a lot better. And my hip was really hurting too because I wasn't exercising enough. And I was
Hmm.
sitting in planes and I was sitting at work and I did have a stand-up desk, but so the pain was coming in. I mean, on my retirement day, I could hardly walk. My hip was hurting so bad. So then
Right.
when I retire, I was busier than ever. I'm like, well, wait a second. I don't have a boss and I don't have a
Mhm.
job, per se. I was doing a
Right.
podcast and I was going to be a coach, but it's like that is what that and then my kid's dad passing away. Those two things
Mhm.
like really woke me up. Like,
Yeah.
whoa, how do I
Yeah.
want to live my life? I
Yeah.
have choices to make, right?
Hmm.
And then when you're ready to make those choices, instead of saying, well, I can't because, you're ready to say, well, how can I? That's when
Yes.
you're ready to work with a coach, I think.
Yeah.
Or it's, I think it's really challenging to do it on your own because we can't see our own blind spots.
That's absolutely right. I think that's one of the things that was phenomenal with the two coaches that I had. They were the right ones. And here's what I recommend as far as for when you're working with a coach. You better find one that's walked the same road that you have,
Hmm.
because it becomes a matter of trust. And that's really a key component. There's two major components that where it helped me transform my thought process completely. It was a matter of, it wasn't that, people run trustworthy. It was a matter of, I had no self-trust for me. My worth was so totally outside of me because I look for other people to boost me up,
Mm-hmm.
situation, accolades, whatever. It was being recognized. All you had to do was take a look at, my gold chevrons and my gold hashtags to be able to go ahead and say, yeah, I was something else.
Yeah.
And honestly, the when all that stuff ends up going away at the end of the day, and you hang up your uniform, or you hang up whatever it is, you have you to look at, and you have to make a choice. Where does your happiness come from? Where does your love come from? Where does your compassion come from? Where does your trust come from? And if you're self-sabotaging any relationships, whatever those look like, inward is where you need to start at, because if you don't start looking at those components and where they originate from, you're just not going to get there. I love one of the things that I keep, that goes through my head on a regular basis. Uh, in one of her books on, Dr. Edith Eva Eger talks about, is leaning in and getting curious about your feelings. And she talks about an instance, and she's a Holocaust survivor, and
Mm.
she was talking about this one instance where this young man ends up coming up. He's wearing the brown boots. He's wearing, and obviously he's, a neo-Nazi, and she goes, one of the hardest things, she goes, I was so angry. And he started spewing off. And she goes, the hardest thing I ever had to go ahead and do is tell me more.
Whoa, when he was angry.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that that's also a component for each of us is, okay, tell me more. Tell me more about, what's going on. And if you have somebody that's in that space and that has, chewed some of the ground that you have, and may not have the exact same experience, but they're drawing from their experience, their hurts, their traumas, their pain, in order to sit along with you. Now, it doesn't mean that I diminish somebody that's a therapist.
Right.
However, I will say I made my biggest breakthroughs in me personally when I work with my coaches,
Hmm.
because there was no sugarcoating. There was no, you know, rumination about going back and forth to what I'd done in the past. It was important to do that, to see foundationally what ended up happening. But by establishing my foundation where I was at, and then then reclaiming the power from people, situations, or events or conditions that prevented me from being my very best self at that point, and rediscovering and evaluating and excavating my core values, is when I finally understood, what did I value. I valued presence, quality time with people, and being present for them, instead of thinking about myself. Number
Hmm.
two, it was integrity. I didn't have an awful lot of that because I was constantly thinking about me and being perfect all the time, and how I was going to project how I looked. And then, number three is, is living with courage and being willing to have those hard conversations and being willing to receive those at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you live in being empathetic and living with empathy, it enables you to sit down alongside somebody else and say, tell me more. And listening, as my girlfriend says, as I said before, talk a little, listen more.
Yeah. Well, how did you switch to being able to listen more? You
Um,
said you used to, well, tonight you're the guest, but you said you used to
yeah,
talk a lot. Like, how did you train yourself to listen more, to really listen?
to really listen, it was a gradual shift because I had to start looking at what worked and what didn't. And if I was so busy talking all of the time, I wasn't listening. If I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't listening, I wasn't growing. If I wasn't growing, I wasn't invested within other people. If I was going to make a difference in people and organizations and helping them transform and helping them, I had to listen. And I also had to listen about things that were not being said as opposed to just things that are being said.
Yeah.
So it just became, I had to make some major decisions on who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be. And some of
Mm-hmm.
that was just letting go of, I didn't need to be right. I
Right.
didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's how I just did a gradual change. It's, you know, it's really funny too. As I talk about Maria an awful lot, my girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
she's absolutely wonderful. She'll see me start slipping into old habits,
Mm-hmm.
and she just reaches her hand over my leg and she goes, honey, you didn't need to tell people everything. And she's just very gentle. And I think that that's what we look for. And I have an internal locus that I end up hearing. Do I want to be, how much do I want to talk? I'd really rather listen because I'm more interested in what other people have to say and what's on their heart. Because the only way that I can end up being there for them is to listen to them and let them know they're important.
Well, you set
That
an intention, right? So it sounds like you do some reflection too, and you think not only about like what do I want to accomplish today, or what, but you think
Mhm.
about like how do I want to be, who do I want to be while I'm doing it, right?
Right.
Like
You know,
I've always been about my to do list, and now I'm more like who am I being? And when I retired, I couldn't name my feelings. We don't talk about feelings in the Navy, right? I couldn't
nope.
name my feelings. My coach would say, "Well, how does that feel?" I'm like, "I don't know. I I know what I think." Which are two different sides of the brains,
Yeah.
right? The thinking is
Yes.
your left, and the feelings are more your right. And so I lived a lot of one-sided of my brain for a lot, and now I've learned how to name my feelings, and even to ask myself, okay, what am I feeling? And even to ask myself, okay, tell me more, what else am I feeling?
Yeah.
And to actually feel it, which is hard, which is not easy to do, but that's the way to let that energy pass through you and not just stick in your body.
Yeah. I think the other components too were sticking to and I'll be honest with you, I'm horrible at journaling. I recommend
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably better at, Mariah Eddington. She is just a phenomenal soul. I just love her to death, and her
Yeah.
husband Byron. They're just lovely people. And she introduced me to mirror work, and mirror
Mm-hmm.
work is phenomenal. People think, oh yeah, you look at the mirror and say, oh, what a great person I am. Really, it's not. It's just identifying, how you would talk to somebody that you love,
Yeah.
because you're not going to harm the heart of somebody that you dearly love or care about. It's just not going to happen. So that really ended up being a transformational component for me as well. Same thing with meditation. I couldn't get through a day. I still can't get through a day with
Of
meditating.
meditating.
Now,
That's been challenging for me. My coach is like, okay, I want you to meditate every day for 40 days. And she said, how much time do you have? And she had these choices, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. So my hyperachiever's like, well, I'm retired. I got an hour. Nah, I know I won't do that. I'll do 15 minutes. And then every other week she'd say, what day are you on? I'd say 1 or 2. She said, what's
yeah,
going on? I'm like, you don't understand. I'm busy. But once I did it, I do feel better when I meditate. Once I
yeah.
did it for the 40 days. So it just takes practice. And so it's not right for everybody. Maybe you get into that meditative state when you work out or when there's something else that you do.
hmm By the way, I've done that as well. I have a very weird type of thing that I'll do in the morning. I typically after I'm done doing my weight workout, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my treadmill. I turn off the lights. I light candles.
Oh,
I
wow.
I have a particular station that I end up listening to. There's either Japanese flute music, or there is Daily Calm that has about a 15-minute program where it just runs you through a breathing practice. And I
Hmm.
close my eyes and I listen to it as I'm on the treadmill.
So you got to figure out what works for you, right? But that's
Exactly.
calming your mind and
Yeah.
being in a meditative state and training your mind to be able to be more aware. Like I didn't even really realize I had a guest once that was telling me I hadn't practiced yoga a lot, but he's like, yoga is a way of practicing mindfulness, right? Because if you
Yes.
really just in the class, don't just go through the poses, but really focus on,
Yes.
how the poses feel and everything. It helps you with your mind to be able to be in the present moment.
Absolutely. And I do that. I do yoga, I do Pilates. Anything that ends up helping you get back to breathing centeredness. Navy SEALs actually have a box breathing that they
Hmm.
typically end up doing, especially for snipers. They'll end up doing they breathe in 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, hold, and not they're just and there's something about that is ultimately calming
Yeah.
at any given instance. So if I'm feeling like I'm really feeling like amped, I'll do that. And I have a job where my 9 to 5 that I'm doing outside to be able to go ahead and keep the bills being paid here
Hmm.
at the house. I just don't get really all that upset with things. I don't get angry. I may get frustrated, but then I start breathing. I go, why am I getting? Same thing with the June I'm talking about too, Emily. Is just like, why am I getting upset with that? Where's that coming from? Why am I being triggered?
Right. Get
And
curious.
exactly.
Well,
Uh,
you could be saying, well, if that person in my office would change, then I wouldn't be this stressed. But that's not the place to look.
no, it's not. It's inner. I had a very interesting conversation with somebody once that they said, well, how come you don't get upset at so and so? I said, I just don't think, there's just not something that really affects me. I said, if they want to go ahead and be that way, that's their prerogative. I
Hmm.
choose not to react.
Hmm.
It's just not worth my mental capacity and my mental space and my mental well-being, as well as my joy and happiness, to do that.
Right. So it's a choice. We all have a choice.
Hmm.
What we choose to think about something. And so when we notice our thoughts, well, why do I want to spend my time getting upset about that? No. And it takes practice, but it takes practice
It,
noticing and recognizing that you can choose something else. But you had said that you wanted to talk about like suicide prevention and also how leaders are missing an opportunity to engage with their team on mental well-being issues.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I appreciate you having that segue. That's really good. We are missing it. Mental well-being in as a way that it is in as a whole within the United States is really poor, in my opinion. If you take, I'm a stats guy. I love statistics. My role with what I ended up doing. I've been in quality for a number of years and being an engineer. You take a look at those type of things. You lean towards numbers. The number of suicides and how that they are at this moment are higher than they've ever been. The anxiety levels, the uncertainty that's happening out there, the lack of EQ within the corporate environment is being reflected within the Great Resignation.
Hmm.
You see the various dynamics within the different age categories that are out there, however that they want to couch it. The Gen Z, Gen X, the millennials, however you want to go ahead and couch it. Each one of them have the same type of thing. They want to be seen, heard, and valued and supported. We're just not doing that as routinely as we should. I was doing a facilitation on a meeting today, and one of the things that one of the people that was there, I had mentioned soft skills, and she got on her soapbox. She goes, I hate that word. I was like, well, I don't know what else to call it. I think that there are probably more, I should say, people-centric skill sets
Hmm.
that some people are well suited to it. And the fact of the matter is, I'm just not seeing that. I'm not seeing it universally, or else we would have more people going back where they feel supported. They feel open enough. You hear about these things called open door policy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have a manager that's on the floor, that's coming in there, that knows every single person in the organization, knows what's happening in their lives, and takes the time to say, hey, listen, I hear that something's going on with you. What's happening? Tell me.
I've had some people think that why should that be talked about at work? Doesn't that take away from like getting the mission done and getting work done?
No. Let me give you a great example. I hate to say this because, it's a baby you and I both love, but there was an instance of the MCPON. He was
Uh-huh.
addressing some,
Chief Petty Officer of the Navy.
and he
Hmm.
was talking to the sailors aboard an aircraft carrier. And I called him out. I said,
Whoa.
you whiffed it. You whiffed the ball. Here are these people that, they're talking about their mental health and the fact that there was a lot of retrofits that were going on. And basically it was almost, the message was suck it up. And I'm like, God, that's a whiff. And it's just like a missed opportunity, but we see that in corporate America as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't take the time to talk about mental well-being. And for those of you that are in manufacturing, like I've been for 37 years, it's actually a part of a number of the international standards that are out there. It talks about, the workplace environment, which reflects directly back into mental well-being.
Yeah.
It's a part of, of a number of different labor laws that are out there. If we don't take that condition about people where they're at, it does take away from that. Let me throw you out some numbers. So in 2018, the cost uh, to the American public for suicide was $1.7 billion. Billion. If you take a look at it, and it averaged, the way I ended up looking at it at that particular point, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.234 million per every suicide that occurred in the United States. Time taken away from the business.
Mm-hmm.
You lose things. You lose organizational knowledge. You lose so much. What ends up happening if you have somebody that's in a key role within your organization that becomes so hampered as a direct result of dealing with the suicide loss, that they start having mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
That was me.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of the most successful departments in the organization. I've been told that a number of times, and didn't preclude me from having to go out. What happens if it's your chief financial officer, your CEO? What happens if it's your chief negotiator? What happens if it whoever that might be? It
What
doesn't
happens
matter.
if it's the people packing your parachute or maintaining your aircraft? It's a safety issue.
Absolutely right.
It's a
It's
safety
absolutely right.
issue. I'm distracted because of, my mental health, and I'm here putting this aircraft part in. I mean, it's a safety issue, but, I just recently took a position, well, on a client, Positive Intelligence, and I'm,
Hmm.
representing them, to the government and helping, US, state, federal, local government understand what positive intelligence can do, how it can strengthen your
Hmm.
mental fitness, how it addresses emotional intelligence as well. And some people get it, and then others are just like, that's not something that we really need in the workforce, or maybe
Right.
that's something that will take it to the employee assistance program or something, but it's more than that.
Yeah, it's the openness. It was interesting. I read recently on a post in LinkedIn. We talk an awful lot about suicide prevention, but something that I never considered, postvention, as we
Hmm.
mentioned in our private conversation. And it's, what do you do afterwards? How do you support your team members? Could be the parachute rigger, could be your janitor, you know could be a young kid, could be someone that's senior, and they're just barely holding it together. I will
Sometimes
I
people
will
don't know what to say, right? It's kind of like when someone has
exactly.
cancer or whatever, you just don't know what to say, so you don't say anything, but that's not the way to deal with it either.
No, it and that's where I look at that I can end up coming in and sitting alongside them. It's helping
Hmm.
them bring in scenarios. It's like going, okay, well, what would you say for somebody that had lost their mom, for natural causes? I'm so sorry to hear that. How can we support you? What are the things that, how are you doing today? Some of that's kind of a, what are the things, how can we support you? What do you need is
Hmm.
more important than how are you? How are you is like, I'm fine.
Right.
No one's fine. It's just, how can I show up for you today? What is it that you need? Do you need me to sit here for you just to sit alongside you? Is it for something that you need somebody just to yell at? What do you need? How can I be here for you today in order to help you through where you're at? And what are the things that you need in the future from me? And if it's just, I need you to stop in periodically and just be normal, or let's
Mhm.
get a cup of coffee. Don't don't preclude them from the normal. It's That's what people really need, is they need the stuff for normal. And but they also don't want someone to shy away from them if they start weeping. Guys are especially bad at that. It's funny. I didn't used to think of myself very emotional until after I lost my daughter. Now I'm probably a little bit more inclined for that. And my girlfriend hates it when I cry, but I'm a softie on certain things.
Yeah, it's
And
a
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say too, I was thinking about like it's very hard sometimes for it can be challenging for me to ask for help, but I remember when my former husband passed away and I was the executor of
Mm,
the estate and I do not like detail and spreadsheets
mm,
and he had so much paperwork and bills that I had to go through, and so what I needed was my mom to just come over and be there and help me keep my mind straight as I was going through it, just because I would just get so distracted and I couldn't focus. And so somebody there helped me really focus. That's what I
yeah,
needed. So that might
yeah,
be something too, like they're having trouble
yeah.
concentrating on tasks, maybe help them out a little bit with a task
I agree
at
with that.
work.
And, reference Brene Brown pretty regularly. One of the things I talk about is marble chart friends. Those are the people that you're going to rely on, that you can end up, that they have developed that level of trust with you and with them, that you can tell your whole story. And those are the people you need to lean on and rely on.
Hmm.
Outside of that, not everybody it needs to hear your entire story. And I didn't. And I'll be honest with you, there's certain people I haven't told my whole story to. They don't need to know because
Yeah.
they haven't gotten to that level. And I'm okay with that. And there's certain days that, when someone says, well, how can I show up for you today? I'm just, today is just not a good day for me. And be okay with that. Is You're not going to have certain days, you're not going to have good days. I still
Right.
have bad days. I mean, but they become less impactful. It's like going, okay, what am I feeling today? Why am I feeling that? Just like you had to talk about, is getting curious about your feelings. And over time, it's refining that joy. But that's where the support system within the organization can be really good. You don't want to be harsh with people, you know, and that's where the balance comes, is having that ability to sit with somebody within the organization that has the skill sets to be able to sit along with them and say, hey, listen, you know, it's not about we've been patient with you. It's just like, well, hey, listen, we see some things that are going on. Do you need more time off?
Hmm.
Are there things that you need help with in order to start rebuilding yourself? What things do you need? How can we end up helping you get get to the place where you feel emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually strong again? What are the
Because we
things that we
value you.
exactly,
Hmm.
instead of, hey, you went out, we put you out, you had time to go ahead and get over it, now come back, and you got to go ahead and hit it out of the park again.
Yeah. So as we wrap it up, this show is about, how to create a life you love living
Hmm.
now, not waiting. And it sounds like since losing your daughter to suicide, you've really worked towards that and that you
Yes,
do love your life now.
I do love my life. It's amazing. I've gotten to the point now where I I I don't have to worry about I don't worry about those dreaded dreams of, being on the roof where she was at and being within inches of grabbing her. Now it's, I'm reliving the happy moments. I have that, restored that joy. I see her back in a happy place. I see her smiling. I see her, her smile and her crazy jokes and asking me if I'm hungry, telling me that, basically it was her way to go ahead and tell me that she was.
What's her
So
name?
Beverly,
Beverly.
yeah.
Awesome.
And so I think from those is where you restore your own joy and derive your own happiness. As you start working through those is what becomes more important. Is it important to be right or do the right thing? It's more important to do the right thing and be willing, be available, and just start seeking out the things that derive happiness for you. And it's different for everybody, but
Right.
it does take work, and it's just not going to happen if you just say, well, if it just, people, this is one thing I will tell people: time does not heal all wounds. Time is just time. The wounds are healed by when you actually invest the time in order to heal yourself. If you have the combination of a good therapist along with a good coach, in my opinion, that's the component where you really start coming out the other side. That's just my recommendation.
Well, congratulations on all the work that you've done on yourself, Brad.
Thank you.
And, I'm going to put up here ways that you can connect with Brad. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. And you also have a Facebook group,
I do.
BGB Love Suicide Prevention Support.
Right.
Yep. And I'll put that in the show notes.
I appreciate that.
And then people can email you, and that's how they get a copy of your book.
Correct.
So right here's the name of your book, From My Heart to Yours, I Am Not My Mistakes.
Yes.
And that just came out.
Yes, it did. Came out May 28th of this year.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. A couple other books going to be coming out. Light Bulb Moments. It's coming out in Australia from Carrie Atherton, where I ended up talking about my journey back out from what I learned from that. Another book, Scars to Stars. That's another one that's actually going to be going out on Amazon, where I'm actually a contributing author for that. That'll be coming out. So a couple of other things that are going to be coming out that's going to be good. I'll be doing a live stream similar to this for having a monthly guest. I'll be able to go ahead and talk about all things suicide prevention, postvention, and how to work with others.
And they can find out more about that on your website.
They can. That's going to be coming out. I'm taking a mild hiatus from that. That's going to be starting in October.
Okay, starting in October. So, and I'll put all this in the show notes for people that are listening to this as a podcast. I want to thank everybody that showed up. James Patrone, Sylvia Cummings. Who else do we have here? Facebook user. I'm not sure who that is, but Bill Bradford, thank you for showing up. Don Jett, nice to see you. Jenny, nice to see you. And Mariah, thank you all for showing up in the comments, and for everybody else who watched tonight. Thank you, Brad, for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're helping so many people by sharing that and by being a coach.
That.
And I agree with what you said. When you're looking for a coach, find somebody who's maybe even just a little bit ahead of where you are. Somebody who's gone through it and going through it and can help you out, understands.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me see. We're going to wrap it up. So thank you all for watching tonight. I appreciate you. I don't know exactly how many more are left, but I think it's like 9 more left. I'll have to know that for next time. I'm not going live next week. Next week, I'm, as part of Creating a Life I Love Living, I'm going to visit my daughter in Denver again. I just was there in July, and now I'm going again. And I don't know if you've been to Red Rocks, but we're going to go to see Steve Miller Band at Red Rocks.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we're going to go to, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a hot springs spa for a couple of days. So.
Yep. And if you're there, go to the fort up in Morrison.
Okay. That's nice too.
I highly recommend it. Make sure you get the bison filet mignon. It is just absolutely fabulous.
Okay. She told me she might move back to Annapolis in a year or so. So I said, well, I'll have to come out a little bit more, and we'll really, live our lives in Denver while you're there. So.
It's amazing. I lived in Littleton for about 2.5 years. Got there in 96. So yeah, I was there for a little bit. It was so weird. You walk out in the backyard and I was right at the base of the front range. So it was just like this.
It's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's funny. My girlfriend and I are talking about where we want to live after I retire. And she's a dual citizen. She's originally from Brazil.
Oh, okay.
So, she goes, Brad, your Portuguese is going to have to get a lot better. But I said, I'm willing to do that. She has she owns a place down there, so it's not a problem. But we're trying to figure out, do I want to live down here? Trying to figure out these things. But I still got, I'm never going to truly retire. It's going to be looking at doing coaching, working in business transformation. And I think that's, doing a pivot. My plan originally was just doing one-on-one coaching
Mm-hmm.
and working with people kind of like me.
Mm-hmm.
But I fought Mike Paterano for the longest time because, Brad, how come you're not doing with stuff with business? I mean, that's where your life has been there. You've run a
Mm-hmm.
company, you've had all this, success in helping, cost savings and those type of things. And I said, yeah, I actually have a book that's unpublished on that really is dealing from when I was a supplier cost engineer. I used to be one of those guys in industrial engineering, and I would take a look at how the man-machine interface, and I take a look at the overhead costs and all the material and all the other stuff and how they end up coming up with it. And I'm like going, you're costing us too much money. We're getting more money coming out of there. I had one instance where I identified $350 million in overcharges in a period of performance of 10 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You're reminding me of my contracting officer days when we used to look at all those rates in the proposal for
Yeah,
airplanes
yeah.
and
So
negotiate.
yeah, absolutely. And, we ended up getting $50 million one-time rebate, but I'm also persona non grata at this one particular company. So that's okay.
Oh, I don't know. Something happened to the connection there.
No, it's okay. A
Don't know
little
what
hiccup,
happened.
but
All
it's
right.
funny, but it is funny and how those things end up working. But yeah, I've had a lot of, wow, that was interesting. Keeps flipping back and forth. Nice.
I moved at that time. I don't know
No, it's
what
okay.
just happened.
But
Yeah.
it's been interesting. So, if am I ever going to retire? Probably not.
My
Probably
dad
not.
was, I think, 83. So,
My mom was 79 when she finally retired, ish.
mhm.
Although she still does, she's a public advocate for children in my hometown, and she's going to be 86. I
Yeah,
keep
that's the
looking.
thing. I mean, what's the people, kind of think about retirement as, you're just sitting in a chair and watching TV. And that's not what retirement has to be, right? It's
No,
what you want to make of it. So
yeah,
it's all about creating a life you love living when you're retired too, which is what
yeah.
I've been working on. So
And that's a good thing. By the
enjoying.
way, I meant to ask you, how are you? How are things with you? I mean, you're talking about me, and I hate doing that because I kept thinking, I want to go ahead and ask Emily how is she doing? How are you navigating things? I know that you have been, extremely busy, and there were some other things that ended up coming up in your life, and I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I'm doing really well. It's at the point now where when my children's father passed away, that was a
Yeah,
really tough time. And that's because I'd shoved feelings down for so long and not dealt with them. So that was three and a
yeah,
half years ago. And I'm not saying my kids are over it or anything, but they're doing well. They're doing well financially and work wise. And so I think everything's kind of back on track. And I feel like lately, up until recently, when I talked to my son, it would be about like, how's this going? How's that going? How's this going? How's school going? And now I'm just like,
yeah.
I just want to do fun things. I don't want to talk about all that serious stuff. I said, how can you meet me in Tyson's Corner in a few weeks and we'll go see Cirque du Soleil with Marshall, my grandson, and let me
Yeah.
go visit Anna. And, so I'm just trying to be more like, being more like that and just enjoying the moment and creating fun memories with them because
Right.
I just think about like what I want to be thinking about and remembering when it's my time to go. Like I saw Bruce go and I don't want to die with regrets. I want to enjoy
Yeah.
every minute. Today I went to pottery class with my mom.
Fun.
This past weekend I went camping with my dog for 2 nights and that was too short. So next time I'm going for 4 nights.
How
So I'm
fun.
I'm loving my life. I'm doing some quote unquote work, but coaching's not work to me. So
Yeah. And my
yeah.
only thing that
Thanks for asking.
I appreciate that. The only thing that I have that is, I guess, is the regret. For me, is just how I used to be. And because of the divorce and the circumstances with it, I'm estranged from my daughters.
Hmm.
And that's tough. And I have a grandson, so that I haven't seen since last August.
But there's still time and you never know, right? Like,
No, I don't know, but it's funny, like, I haven't seen my youngest daughter since December 24th of 2019.
mm,
And I started looking at, doing a lot of reading on estrangement, those type of things. And they say for mothers that are estranged from their children, it's usually about a 3 to 5 year estrangement. For fathers, it's much longer, 7 to 9.
oh,
So, I just had to make some decisions, and as far as for how I was going to interact with them. And you know, my decision that I ended up doing this year was I had been, being a good dad and sending gifts and those types of things, but I finally came to the realization that to me it felt like begging.
Mm-hmm.
And and I just said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to send gifts and for my grandson, because you know he's deserving of that. But as
Yeah.
far as for my kids, I'm just going to go ahead and live my best life. My girlfriend, she had lost her husband and her son in Brazil due to violence. And, so I just believe that there is, for me, people talk about their higher power. Me, for it was God. And I had actually was looking at moving out of the US completely and leaving you know, before meeting going back and reconnecting with my girlfriend. I was
Mm-hmm.
looking at moving to Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had quite a bit of funds set aside. And I went to talk to my boss, and I said, well, hey, I've been doing really well. And he goes, yeah, you have. And I said, I've been working remote, and no issues. Nope. I said, it would there be an opportunity that would be a benefit both to the company and to me if I was to move permanently. And he goes, where are you thinking about? I said, well, Ireland. And he goes, well, actually, he says, Brad, that actually has a lot of potential, because our main organization is in Germany, and our original organization is in Bath, England. So there were some things that would have been good on a number of different levels. He says, I'm not saying yes. He says, but keep on looking. So I started thinking about that, and I said, okay, there's got to be two things that are not going to come into play. One, money can't be an issue. Two, you can't put anybody in the only reason that I would stay is if I had a relationship that would be, and I gave certain conditions. It had to be, had all these things that were associated with it. I said, never going to happen.
Ah.
Well, because of the startup costs for the company, and because of I had supported a few people, they were down, and I was paying things forward for a few people, and also with coaching and all the other stuff that I was paying. Yeah, the funds went way down. So, and then, I reconnected with Maria, not really. I was like, well, we'll just have friendship and everything. But no, it was just been fabulous.
That's
Uh,
perfect. It's like it tends to happen when you're not looking, right? And so that's awesome. It all worked out,
it did.
right?
So there's
And,
reasons that
and I'm not saying that I won't have regrets. I have regrets too over some ways that I've lived my life and some decisions I've made, but I'm not going to, I have self-compassion too, compassion for myself. None of us are
yes,
perfect, right?
yeah,
And I wouldn't say that I'm estranged from my sister, but she doesn't talk to me. And I've sent her a video, and I feel like I've written her a letter. I mean, I know that she's not on here to tell her side of the story,
mm,
but I'm not going to beg either. And I don't know what else to do. So,
there's two things you can do. One, love her
yep.
at a distance, and two, pray for her. And
Hmm.
that's one thing I pray for my girls is I pray for them that God would soften their heart, not because of me, but to
Hmm.
heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I pray for. It's really just, it's very simple. And I just like, you're living your best life. And that's what you make that choice every single day.
Right. And I feel good that I've tried and that I am sending her positive energy, praying for her. I have love in my heart for her. I have
Hmm.
compassion for her. And there's, one day it could all work out. So,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And you can reach out anytime. I'm going to shoot you my cell phone number too. You can
Okay.
reach me at any time.
Thanks, Brad. I really enjoyed you being on the show tonight. And thank
Thank
you
you
for
so much.
everybody who watched. I know we said goodbye, but we kept talking and it was fun.
It was. It was. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All
Have a
right.
wonderful rest of your evening.
All right, you too.
Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable, and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest. I look